Yep.
I can edit it.
Yeah.
Hey guys, so this time I'm going to talk a little bit about some aspects I think a lot of people ignore in developing their game. So I want to talk about performance in Jiu-Jitsu and the 5 aspects that build up to that. So often we always think of like the most important thing is technique, which I totally agree. Like I'm like a small lanky guy. It's like, you know, I fight guys who are bigger and stronger. Technique is super important. But also I see a lot of people neglect some of the other aspects. So I wanted to define what's the most important things for elevating your performance when you're fighting, right? So to me, there's 5 things that contribute to making you do better when you're actually sparring. Not like demoing a technique, but like if you're actually sparring or you're actually competing and you want to do better in those matches when you're fighting, what do you need to do to get to that point, right? So of course, technique matters a lot. I've talked a lot about like positional sparring and like how to develop your technique in the previous videos. The other 4 factors after technique that are really important are strength, mobility, endurance or cardio, and your mindset. Right? In this video, I want to talk mainly about the first 4, which is technique, strength, mobility, and endurance. The mindset is also important, but I think it's definitely the least important of the 5. Right? Like if you have no technique, you walk in off the street and you have great mindset, like you're still gonna lose if you go fight Keenan Cornelius, right? Like your mindset's not gonna carry you through. If you have great jiu-jitsu, like your technique's really good, you're really strong, you're really mobile, everything's on point, then, you know, like often, even if you have a terrible mindset, you'll go win tournaments. Like I've definitely had tournaments earlier in my career, or like when I first fought at black belt, where I was in my head thinking, oh man, I'm gonna get killed, and then I go kill the guy I'm fighting, right? So the mindset, I don't wanna focus so much on that, right? So now we're gonna talk about technique, strength, mobility, and endurance. So let's talk about mobility. I think mobility is probably the most under-focused on aspect of your game. So let's say that you want to improve your jiu-jitsu in sparring like the fastest way possible, right? So if you want to improve, if you've already been training for a few years and you want to improve your performance by doing technique, it may take like another 6 months to a year of hard work to have an improvement in your guard of like 40 to 50%, right? But I would argue for a lot of people that are not taking their mobility seriously, that you could have probably a 40-50% improvement in your guard game just by taking your mobility seriously for a few weeks, right? So what I mean by that is like, let's say that you're, you know, and what you need to work on is different for every person. But let's say your mobility for like the butterfly stretch, right, is like you're here, like this, right? You can't push your knees down. So if you really work at this hard for like 3 or 4 weeks, you're gonna make huge gains. You can probably get all the way down to here, right? Even like a few days, you're gonna loosen up a lot. But the difference that makes when you're actually in a match is like, if I'm here, let's do it this way, go on this side. Okay. So if I'm here, right, and someone's trying to like knee cut past me, and let's say, actually back up real quick. Let's say with the butterfly stretch, right, I can only go this far apart, right, because I'm really tight. If he starts knee cutting me here, right, I can only go this far. Drop your shin here, right? See, I can't open any more than this, right, because I don't have the mobility. But if I'm flexible, it's easy to open out to here. Now I can lasso and get myself out of the position, right? If you don't have that mobility, we have to build around it, right? So maybe we can build a game based off of not having that mobility. You can try to knee shield or play a single leg guard. We can work around that. But oftentimes I tell my students, because they're like, well, I'm not flexible, what do I do? It's like, well, what's easier? Is it easier to build an entire game around the fact that you can't touch your toes? Or is it easier to develop touching your toes, right? Because sometimes, you know, like 2 or 3 weeks of stretching, you're going to be able to go from nothing to touching your toes, for example, right? But if you, to work around that with technique could take years to develop a whole game around not being able to do that. And it's like if you have the dedication to go to class like 3 or 4 times a week even, spar for 2 hours and go through all this hard training, right? Why not just take 3 times a week, 30 minutes a day to stretch when you can do it at your house while watching TV or playing on your computer and have just as much of an improvement in your performance on the mat? Honestly, I tell some students that if they had an option of either 2 months of serious hard jiu-jitsu training or versus just not train for 2 months and just take their mobility really serious, of course you want to do both. But if it was one or the other, a lot of people would stand to benefit more in their performance by doing 2 months of just mobility work rather than even training jiu-jitsu. It is that important, right? So the point of this video is I want you guys to understand that it's not just your technique. It's like you have to put these 5 things together and find what's the weakness for you, right? Same thing with strength, right? Like strength, It's not like you need to be stronger to defeat your opponent and like out muscle your opponent, but there's certain positions that have a basic strength and mobility requirement to be able to do. So take, for example, the spider guard, right? Like if I'm here, there's a certain element of grip strength and pulling strength required to be able to play this position. If he postures up, right? Like I'm pretty strong, you know, I can work on like one arm pull-ups, front levers and stuff. This isn't very taxing for me. But if you're like, to take it to an extreme, if you're not strong enough to hold from a pull-up bar, just imagine like you just can't even hang from a pull-up bar because you don't have the grip strength and the pulling strength, then spider guard doesn't work. It's not that spider guard's a bad position, it's just that when the guy postures away, you can't handle it. You have to let go, right? The analogy I like to use is like, if you have like a computer game or something, it may be a good game and like all the programming, everything is great, but if your computer doesn't have the hardware, powerful enough hardware to run it, then it's just not going to work, right? So basically every position has a basic strength and mobility requirement to do. Strength and mobility defines what your body can do. If you're infinitely strong and infinitely flexible, then you can play positions that normal people couldn't play. You can hang from the guy's collar with one hand and pull and lift your body off the floor, right? So this and notice also like with the spider guard, that strength isn't relative to him, it's relative to myself, right? I'm not like in a tug of war match versus the guy. His maximum he can do is deadlift and I can hang from him. Once I'm hanging, there's no way for him to make it heavier. I'm hanging off of his sleeves, right? It's about strength relative to my own body weight, right? So I don't want to get too much into like what's the right way to strength train, what's the right way to mobility train. I mean, I could talk a little about what I do. I like to stick to like higher difficulty or higher weight with lower repetitions, like the 3 to 5 rep range, like 3 to 5 sets. I do a mix of body weight, like gymnastics and weightlifting. A couple book recommendations if you guys are interested is Stretching and Flexibility by Kit Laughlin. You can find it online somewhere. I think he has a website. Also for gymnastics, I follow, some of you guys probably have seen Chris Summers' Gymnastics Bodies. I think there's another one, Overcoming Gravity is really good, recommended on Reddit's Bodyweight Fitness. Those are really good starting points for that. And then as far as endurance goes, like you can get endurance in many ways, right? As long as you're focusing on your technique with like specific training, you're developing your strength and mobility, you can get your endurance honestly just from sparring a lot. That's going to build your endurance. If you feel like, for me, I get injured very easily. Like right now I have a back injury. Sometimes like trying to get my endurance purely from hard rounds, I find can be dangerous just because like there's so much chaotic movement. So I still spar hard, but if there's a difference between rolling like I would in a tournament. Like if I'm in a tournament and I have the guy in a lasso, for example, maybe I'm here, right? And like he won't give me the sleeve. I really want to get the sleeve. It makes sense for me to take my time and try to work until I can get this sleeve, right? Or maybe I'm really tired. I need to catch my breath for a minute before I launch my next attack, right? But if I'm trying to push my cardio like you do when you run stairs, I need to keep moving. So maybe I need to kick his leg and come up and start going crazy, right? But that may not actually technically be what I need to do in that moment. So you need to I try to, any session I do of jiu-jitsu, of weightlifting, whatever, I try to have an intent behind it. Right now, am I trying to develop my strength? Am I trying to develop my technique? Am I trying to develop my mobility, my mindset? Like what am I trying to develop? Try to think about those 5 aspects and how you're working on developing them, right? So for endurance, like speed drills can be really good. Like if I'm just doing as many Toreandos as I can in 2 minutes, for example, I'm not doing that to develop my timing and my skill. That's what I use specific training for. But it is a good way of knowing that I'm not going to do anything really dangerous to injure myself, and I can push my cardio much harder than I would in the context of a regular match in certain ways, right? Like if we're here, for example, you can make up your own drills, right? Like I could be here and I can just, this side, right? And if I do this for 2 minutes, I can get so much lactic acid and burn and push from doing that hard for 2 minutes, like 5 rounds of 2 minutes with like breaks in between. I can push past a point and I would in a regular match, because in a regular match, sometimes your ego gets in the way. Maybe you want to win that match. We can all say we don't have an ego, but sometimes you want to win the match, and then you're like, man, I'm going to rest here for a second. You don't push like you could. If I put you on a treadmill, I just say, go as long as you can, or I give you, like a minute and I push you really hard, you'll push harder than you will in a match. Because in a match, sometimes you give up and you go, okay, I'll just sit in side control. Or you find a position you can hold like worm guard or 50-50 and you just kind of hang on there for a minute to catch your breath back. That's different than purely pushing your cardio. That's why I like to kind of isolate these things separately so that you can focus on what you're developing. That being said, I would say the three most important are technique, strength, and mobility. Cardio, you can peak relatively quick before a tournament. If you get like a month out from the tournament, you can ramp up the intensity of your jiu-jitsu and your cardio will get good quick. But if you want to get really strong, that's not the kind of thing that you can just get a month before a tournament and get strong. That's stuff that people build on for years and even decades, right? Guys who are really strong, like they do strength training religiously, they pay attention, they rest properly, they eat healthy, and they do it over a long period of time. This is the best way to develop your strength if you're not using performance enhancers, which unfortunately a lot of people in our sport do. You need to take slow time to build this up. It's not something you can just wait until way late in the game and just go, oh, I'm going to get strong now in 6 weeks. It doesn't work like that. It takes a long time of development. So closing thoughts, like I just really, it's a little bit of a different video. My back is injured right now, so I wanted to talk some more conceptual stuff. I just really think if you guys try to reassess how you're training and where you're getting your, how you're developing those attributes will make a big difference, right? So again, one more time, technique, I usually recommend a lot of specific training, a lot of film study. I may do a video about how to properly study film, and having a good mentor or instructor to learn from is the best way to develop technique. The strength, I like, find your references, but either weightlifting or gymnastics, higher weight, higher difficulty, lower rep. Mobility, find a good reference for stretching, but you can just pick 5 or 6 stretches and start and stay at them. Endurance, I like speed drills and just hard jiu-jitsu training rounds. And then mindset, you can even set up rounds where the goal is just to push, kind of like that. I can go more into that in a separate video. But I think if you guys really start trying to approach like those 5 attributes and look at where you're weak and strong, it'll really help ramp up your performance. Because a lot of guys, they don't understand that, like, hey, maybe my strength isn't enough, right? Because they're so focused on the technique, they don't understand that is a factor, right? There's a reason that a lot of guys use steroids, and it's not because they want to just look good, right? It's because it helps them when they're fighting, right? So if you don't want to use steroids, you need to take the scientific approach and start studying strength and do it properly. All right, guys. As always, if you guys like the video, please comment, subscribe, like, share. All that helps a lot, and look forward to the next video. Thanks a lot, guys.